Welcome to the third episode of the Indus Eagles Echoes podcast, proudly presented by Indus International School, Hyderabad. I'm Sanyogita Bobba, and alongside me is Shreya Ramesh. Together, we'll be your hosts as we reconnect with our extraordinary alumni. In each episode of this podcast, we'll be exploring the journeys of our alumni, uncovering wisdom and experiences they've gained during and since their time at Indus. Today, we're thrilled to take a look at Mehek Sanghavi's Life After Flight from Indus's graduating class of 2023. Currently, Mehek is pursuing her Bachelor's of Medicine and Surgery at Curtin University in Australia. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly an honor for us to have you here. I know that I've introduced you very briefly, but if you could give us a bit more insight into you.
Sure. After graduating in DUS, I had around 8 months, honestly, before I started my university. So in those 8 months, I've done whatever I can for applications and everything. And now I just finished my first year at Curtin University. So yay, looking forward to the second one.
That's great. Before we talk about your life in college, I would like to focus first on your journey and experiences during IB. It's an extremely rigorous program, and on our call previously, you told me your subjects, biochemistry and psychology HL, if I'm not wrong,
Yeah.
and English, Hindi, and math SL. How did you deal with such overwhelming subject choices? I'm doing something really similar to you, and I cannot manage, like, my schedule's all over the place and I'm really trying to focus, but it's just not working. So how did you manage your subject choices and extracurriculars and all that?
Well, obviously everyone's gonna tell you this, but it's one to make sure that you study as you go. Like piling it all up until a week before exam is not gonna work. And I think everyone has different work ethic, and it really depends on whether you're a visual learner or like you like audio more. So for me, what helped the most was making notes. So I was like the crazy like color coordination for different subjects with a whole like notebook of pages with different topics. And I used to just read that before the exam because it was all like concise in that one notebook instead of going over the textbook. So that's what worked for me.
Okay, so Mahek, obviously you've gone into medicine and surgery, right? So a very common IB subject combination that I've seen a lot of my friends and that counselors recommend is biology, chemistry, and physics. However, you've taken psychology instead, which is quite unique if I do say so. So why have you decided to do that? And also, for what type of students would you recommend this course of action?
Okay, first of all, it really depends on whether you want to study medicine in India or you want to go abroad for sure. Because in India, as you know, for NEET, you definitely need to have physics because that's a by-PC route. But I was sure that I wanted to go study in Australia, which is why I dropped physics because it wasn't a compulsion. Which again, before you do that as well, I'm not saying do that with a blind eye. Check your colleges in whichever country you want to apply. Make sure that the course requirement doesn't state physics. And mine didn't. That is why I chose to drop physics because I didn't like it as much as I was interested in psychology. And I thought psychology would also help with maybe trying to understand a little bit because medicine at the end of the day is also about patience. So I thought maybe psychology would help like become a better doctor per se in a way where you'd maybe understand patient psychology more, or like maybe it'll help in if by chance I end up choosing to do psychiatry later on. That's why.
So I think it was actually really a great decision and a thought through decision for you to drop physics. I'm also planning on doing medicine and I took physics. My God, regret. So much regret. Now, could we talk a little bit about your transition from Indus to your college? Not just academically, but socially, culturally. How did you feel and how did you deal with all of that?
It's definitely a change, right? Because in hostel, I lived in hostel and it was in Indus and it was like you're constantly with your friends. So that's something which remained with me even when I went to college, and that really helped because then you know how to like socialize and communicate with the people that you're living with, even on campus. But you always get things done, right? Like your food is cooked for you and the laundry, you just have to give it to them and they do it for you. They fold your clothes for you and give it back. And you always have a support system of home when you're in the same school, which is in your home state, or even just a few like kilometers away, even if it's that. But once you go out, it's really like, oh, now I'm on my own and I have to figure life out. But I think it really helps if you just take your time. You don't have to feel rushed. It's okay to feel overwhelmed by everything. And I feel like what helped me the most was expressing my emotions, calling my best friends, calling my mom, and going like, I am not okay. Like I'm missing home. And so I think showing your emotions works and knowing that it's okay to take some time to get used to the change.
So, as you have said, apart from academics, social life is very important in college, right? And you are located in Australia, so you're studying medicine in Australia. And I'm not sure if you know this, but we previously did an episode with Famida, and she's studying medicine in UK. So, if you can tell us a bit of what you think is unique in Australia, I think our listeners would be able to make a comparison between the two countries.
Um, well, I feel like I'm not going to be able to give you the best insight, probably just because I don't know a lot about the UK medical system. But from what I have heard, and I mean no offense to any of the listeners, and I don't want to get called out for saying anything I do right now because it's obviously just my own opinion and what I've heard. But in Australia, a lot of people do think that the Australian medical system itself after graduation is a bit better than the NHS, which is the UK medical system. But I feel like to really, you know, say that as a fact rather than an opinion, um, more research has to be done, and that has to be done by the student. And apart from that, Australia, the medical course, a lot of the universities have direct entry as well, like the UK. And my course is 5 years, and I get my MBBS degree. And after that, you have to do 1 year of internship in a hospital, and then you can choose to do your specialization, etc. The only difference, I guess, would be one, the exams that you have to give. In Australia, the ISAT is one of the very important exams for international students, and UCAT, which is the same as the one for UK. But for Australia, there's a separate one called UCAT ANZ, which is Australia and New Zealand. So giving both of these exams is something you must do before you apply for Australian medical schools.
So, going off of what you said, there are quite a bit of differences between Australian and UK medical school, from what I remember from the past episode. So, can you tell us why you chose Australia and what the benefits are there?
I personally chose Australia mainly because I think you have to remember that once you get your medical license, you always have that question of whether I should start practicing in the country that I've gotten my license in, or should I go back to my home country? And for me, if there was any country where I could even imagine settling down apart from India, was Australia, just because I have family there and I've gone there since I was a child. That was honestly the main reason. But apart from that, I do think that it is comparatively still at least a bit easier to get citizenship in Australia, which is something I think a lot of people would consider while moving to another country as well, especially if they're thinking of settling down there, which is definitely a plus. And I think again, it just depends on what kind of lifestyle you want also, because Australia admittedly is a more chilled out lifestyle, especially depending on which state you choose to go in. And in Perth, especially, it's a bit more quiet, a bit more like a chilled out lifestyle where everything shuts off by like 5, 6, and then all you can do is hang out with your friends and your family, go out to parks, maybe restaurants and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a mix of whether you want such a lifestyle and whether you're looking for a country which you have some kind of support system in.
Right, but irrespective of the location you choose, colleges always look for diversity in students, right? They look at your academics, they look at your extracurriculars. The focus may differ, but ultimately they all want the same thing. They want to see that you're all rounded and everything. So academically, you're great, we know that. And I'm sure you've had a lot of extracurriculars on the side, one of which you talked about was your observership at Yashoda Hospital. Would you care to elaborate a little bit about that and how that helped you actually choose the field of medicine and so on?
Mhm. Well, in Yashoda Hospital, I went for observership for 1 week because I was like, mm, doing medicine is like a very big commitment, right? So if I want to be sure that that is what I want to do, I want to go throw myself into that environment and see whether I'm actually able to handle it. So it was like 1 day in different departments. One of my days was in the ER, for example, and it was really hectic, and there was blood and lots of patients and full time on your feet. But even in that kind of environment, I felt like I had fun and I didn't mind standing the entire day. And I actually wanted to see more instead of like being, scared by the blood and stuff. So I feel like that's when I knew that actually this might just be for me. Like I want to do this. Um, but I also did 1 week in a physiotherapy clinic because I wanted to consider all my options in terms of healthcare, and physiotherapy was something I was considering.
So I remember you telling us on our call yesterday that you were stuck between choosing physiotherapy and medicine. Do you care to elaborate a bit on that? What were the advantages and disadvantages with both fields, especially for you?
Well, I think that for me, with physiotherapy, the disadvantage would have been that in India, I think that physiotherapy or occupational therapy and those kind of allied health specializations are still a growing field. That's not the first thought that would come to you if you needed help with mobility and stuff, except if your doctor would have actually asked you or referred you to a physiotherapist. But that is why I was like, maybe I want to do something which might give me more scope if I was to come back to India. And also, that's why I went to the physiotherapy observership, right? And I realized that as much as I appreciated the kind of work they do as well, it was more focused on mobility and movement, right? Like rehab stuff, which is more on anatomy and just making sure that any physical abnormalities or any kind of rehab, even if it's related to neuro, that's what they help in. And I wanted to do something which gave me an option to specialize in or focus on whichever organ system I wanted in the body, and a more like I wanted something that covers more breadth, if that makes sense. And I think medicine was that. So that is why I kind of chose to go ahead with that as well.
So, have you specified what organ system you want to work with, or are you still deciding?
I'm still deciding because my uncle, who's a doctor, he told me that if you go into medicine thinking, again, this is just for me, I'm sure there are lots of people out there who already know what they want to do, and that's amazing. They have a passion and they should go for it. But if you don't, then that's completely fine, because if you go into medicine with the pressure of having to choose something, then you're only going to try and concentrate on that because you feel like it's a need. But if you just go with an open mind and say, I'm fine with doing whatever, then as you progress over the years, you'll really try to focus on every single thing, and you'll find out what you're being drawn to more, if that makes sense. And in that way, you'll be able to narrow down what you really want to do. And fourth, fifth year, I have my hospital placements. And I think that's when you really get to know what each specialization actually entails of, because right now I might just have a perception of what each specialization is like. So I'm just waiting.
So, moving on completely from this topic, I have a very broad question, so please feel free to answer it however you'd like. Is there any advice that you would like to offer to students, especially IB students at Indus, who are considering a career in medicine or healthcare in general?
Definitely. If you're in 10th grade, especially, I don't know if you're watching this or not, but if you are, then Yashoda Hospital, from what I know, does do like um some program where in the summer they allow 10th graders to come and do like a more organized version of what I did with my observerships. So try and be on a lookout for that, number one. Number two, start going online on the college websites, wherever you're planning on applying to, and start looking at their requirements, because it might be too late to apply for any exams or do any extracurriculars that they might have asked for per se, and start doing your research and obviously preparing for the exams. Um, I think this is not a compulsion, but for me, hiring or taking and some paid tuitions for preparing for those interviews and exams was something that helped. But there's always online resources and stuff as well. So just make sure you're prepared and organized so that later on, when 12th grade and applications come close, you don't feel burdened.
So that's advice you would offer to students. What do you think you could have done differently in your past years, in IB specifically?
I feel like I could have made my decision and narrowed down what I wanted to do a lot earlier, because until like 11th starting, I was like, I don't want to do medicine because it's too much work, it's too much studying. But I think that was just because of the fear. Like, I always felt like I wanted to do it, but I was scared of studying. But I think that if this is why, if you're considering any profession, even if you're not sure about it, start trying to look into it. Even if you're in 10th, try and do the work so that later on you don't have any regrets. Because I feel like if I would have started a few extracurriculars a little bit sooner, maybe I would have gotten admission in some other universities, which I didn't. And also, I feel like I could have spent a little more time in terms of my preparations for the IB exams, because even though I got a decent score, I feel like I could have done better. So I feel like I focused a little bit too much on things that I was weak at, and that did help me. But I feel like that balance kind of went out of the way when I was studying for my IB boards, because I got scared of the things, like the parts that I was weaker at. So I feel like that would have maybe helped me.
So this is the final question. IB is really rigorous, as we talked about at the beginning, meaning there's so many different things that we have to do on top of preparing for board exams like TOK, EE, and so forth, right? So can we know a bit of how you managed your time from 11th grade till 12th grade, and when you did what exactly, and if you think that was too early, too late, good?
I think I mainly started focusing on studying for the exams, like solving past papers and stuff around February, which I think was a little too late. I procrastinated. I know that it sounds like, oh, but it's like a whole month early, but there's so many past papers. And if you think of it like for each subject, I think I should have done it a lot sooner. But I started to get my extended essay done, at least try and get halfway through it or try and get through the research stuff by the start of 12th. So like I started doing it during the summer vacation. And I think I tried my best to finish the TOK and stuff almost as quickly as I could after everything was released and we were asked to get it done. Because once you get your TOK and IAs out of the way, you can really start to focus on just studying for your exams. And at the end of the day, that's something you have to put in a lot of time and effort into. And I think what helps the most is making sure that for your TOK, extended essay, IAs, you don't feel shy to kind of bug your teachers. Like it's it's okay to ask them for help constantly. Like if you show interest in what you are doing and if you show interest that you want to get it done as soon as you can and there's that dedication from your side, even if they feel a little bit bothered, like they will 100% want to help you out as well. They just need you to, put one foot forward first.
Okay, so I think we've covered everything about your journey, your extracurriculars, college life. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussion with Mehek, a truly inspiring individual whose journey into medicine in Australia is nothing short of extraordinary. So, to our listeners, whether you're considering a future in healthcare, already on that track, or indecisive, I hope her story has offered you with fresh perspectives, some practical advice, and a dose of encouragement to follow your passions and aim high. Thank you for listening to the third episode of Indus Eagles Echoes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mehek.
Thanks for having me.